Hello, welcome again to another chapter in Information Security Management and Assurance. For today's chapter, we are actually going to continue on the chapter on security planning. So previously, you have looked at how you actually need to compose the policy, procedure, and guideline for a certain security control. So for today, in continuation of this chapter, we are going to look at how do we actually train or perhaps embed certain values of security that we want for our people to follow. So part 3 particularly focuses on the education, training, and awareness for our people. Why is it important? Because usually, if you remember from your previous exercises, when we have our hardware and also hardware to actually control the protection for the asset that we deem very useful or perhaps very dear to our organization, usually the problem is not on the hardware and software in terms of making sure that your information asset is safe. Usually, the most very weak, or perhaps if you can make it a stronger version of the security, is the people. You can have so much of very high-tech hardware and software in order to protect your security asset, but if your people do not understand the value or perhaps the role they play in terms of having that security control or having to protect that information asset, then your very pricey hardware and software will not actually meet its objective. So that's why in this very part of the chapter, we are going to look at how do we actually make sure that our people, okay, however or where they are actually is in our organization, whether they are just normal people or whether just cleaners or perhaps non-technical people or management, they know the responsibility that comes with protecting or in protecting the asset that you deem worthy of protection. Okay, so you remember previous exercises, you have identified the asset that you want to protect, and then perhaps you have certain security that you want to make sure that your people understand that this is very important for protecting your information asset, and you have your procedures and you have your guideline. So the next step here is to make sure that whatever policy that you want to achieve, whatever procedures that you want people to follow, they understand why they need to do it and the importance or the role that they play in actually protecting your information asset. Before we go further, I want to share the quote from the Human Firewall Council. So it states here that the people are usually the missing link in improving information security because technology alone cannot solve the challenges of information security. So what does it mean? Okay, it simply means that just like I said earlier, you can have very sophisticated hardware and software to actually protect your information asset, but if your manpower is not actually understanding on the importance that play in terms of protecting the asset and just rely on the software and hardware alone, then your information security mechanism or control will not be very successful. That's why from the very beginning, you must understand what or how many types of group of people you have in your organization and how do actually they use the information asset that you want to protect. So understanding this from the very beginning is very important because you want to ensure that whatever or whoever that is going to and fro within your organization, they know or perhaps they understand how to use the mechanism that you actually implemented and they understand the very basics of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information that they play in terms of protecting that asset. Usually, in every good organization, they have a very thorough and well-thought security education, training, and awareness program. The very base objective of this program is to, of course, handle the human factor in any organization. Usually, it is to reduce accidental security breaches by member of the organization. So what are examples of these accidental security breaches? Okay, you always hear this. Sometimes people accidentally click on perhaps the link that they found in their email. They accidentally perhaps succumb to social engineering attack from social network, or perhaps through their email, or perhaps through phone call, and they accidentally introduce perhaps foreign devices into the network of their organization. So in these instances, you can have very good software and hardware installed to protect the very uh, environment of your software and your information asset. But if your people actually brought that threat into the system, then that hardware and software that you actually install throughout the outer perimeter will not actually work. So this is where the very core of the training program is to prevent people from actually being manipulated to do these things, or perhaps accidentally introduce a threat into the environment. So the three major benefits of such program is you want to improve your employee behavior. Secondly, you want to actually inform members of your organization where to actually report if certain incident happen, who is actually responsible, what to do, okay, if incident happen. And then the third one is to enable organization to hold employees accountable for the action. So they must understand that every action within the organization with relate to the critical information asset have certain repercussion or consequences. These consequences can either be a rewarding consequences, or perhaps there can be some sort of disciplinary action if certain incident happen because of the negligence of the people or the person in the organization that causes the incident. So these are the three major benefits that you aim to actually obtain when you introduce this SETA program. So when developing such program, you need to actually remember from the very beginning when you actually model or design the program, the first focus is to actually enhance security. First is in terms of building the in-depth knowledge of your workforce. So you need to identify who is your in organization, who is going in and out of the organization, who is actually the people that is directly in contact with the information asset, and how do you actually build the knowledge by understanding their basic skills to become the very strength in order to protect your information asset. Secondly, you want to enhance security by developing the skills and knowledge of your workforce in terms of handling incident, in terms of identifying threats, in terms of perhaps reducing the risk that could actually be fallen into your information asset. And then lastly, to improve the awareness to your workforce. Awareness simply means that you want to actually enhance or perhaps improve their behavior in terms of security skills and perhaps security behavior. So they can understand, okay, what are the risks if they do certain things that perhaps could jeopardize the security of information asset, and perhaps they know, okay, if incident happen, who will they report to and what to do. If there accidentally is a malware introduced into the system, okay, what is the first thing that they must do in order to handle such incident? So these are the focus that you need to remember when you actually design your SETA program. The very core focus is your people. So you want to improve your people so that you ensure that they are the first lines of defense in terms of protecting your information asset. So again, the very focus of the awareness program is to educate the users, improve their behavior, and you want to make sure that you can change or have a positive attitude of the people when actually handling your information asset. And you want to remind your people, okay, in order to actually gain or perhaps making sure that the policy is being upheld, there are certain procedures that they must follow, and why that there are those procedures there to make sure that the policy is being upheld, and perhaps to make sure that the policy can be actually successful to protect the information asset. So the core or the gist of it is to make sure that you can actually improve your workforce and they actually know what to do if certain incident happen. So this is an example of an accidental behavior that could jeopardize the security of your information asset. Can you actually recognize what are the incident here? So the title says Oblivious disclosure. So what is happening here? So you see one guy is being actually interviewed in the news. Okay, so what is wrong with that? Okay, so if you see in the background there, okay, they have the information that is very confidential, the username and also the password with regard to that very facility. So this is actually accidental, but it is very jeopardizing to the asset that you want to protect. So this can be actually controlled if people understand. Let's say when you are actually doing an interview, make sure in the background there are no actually incriminating information that you can accidentally give to the public or perhaps the attacker or the possible attacker, because usually attackers are very much patient in nature. They always study the environment, they always look at possible loopholes or weaknesses in the system or in the organization that they want to infiltrate. Usually attack doesn't just happen just overnight. Usually the attacker will study every bit of information with regard to the information that they want to attack. So that's why the very first thing in the awareness program, you want to ensure that your people know what are actually safe security behavior. Okay, so this is to ensure that no accidental incident actually happen that could cause a very weakness or the attacker to easily come into your organization and harm your information asset. So I repeat again, when you are actually designing your own setup program for your organization, first of all, you need to understand or identify how many types of user you have in your organization, and you must try to understand why users are vulnerable. So usually the reasons are listed there. So first of all, they are not aware of the risks and consequences of certain action with regard to actually jeopardizing the information asset. And then secondly, they are aware of the risk, but again, the security is too much work. Perhaps it's very cumbersome to remember, hard to enter password, or perhaps they find it very cumbersome to change their password every 3 months, for example. And as a result, they use a very easy password and repeatance of password. Or perhaps they just paste their password on the workstation because they find it hard to actually remember those passwords. And other example is perhaps they find it cumbersome to actually carry the keycard anywhere, and then they end up sharing the keycard, okay, with their friend. And then thirdly, they are aware of the risk, but security is too complex. Okay, perhaps you can have biometric, you can have fingerprinting, you can also have two-factor or three-factor authentication. But if you don't understand the user that is actually using those authentication method, you might perhaps find that these people find that your security measure is too complex and making it hard for them to actually use it. And then 4, attackers find ways to manipulate your user as a result of the 1, 2, and 3 factors above. So they can impersonate legitimate authority, they can try to scare users, they can perhaps manipulate the users in using their authentication or perhaps their access control mechanism. So the attacker find ways to actually manipulate your people because they understand these people have certain weaknesses. Okay, so you must understand first and foremost, when you design a SETA program, you must try to understand why certain people in your organization are actually susceptible or open to the threat. So when you actually identify these weaknesses, you can design your SETA program to actually cover or handle those uh, uh, shortcomings, and to ensure that people know, okay, these things are actually very wrong to do, or they can have certain consequences if they are not followed very well. So usually as a result, if people do understand the importance, or when they find security is very much cumbersome or very tiring to do or implement, they circumvent or stop paying attention to actually use those security mechanisms. And then rules are not obeyed, and perhaps the security measures become a joke. They find it hard to actually use those mechanisms that you have, because they don't understand, and because no proper training are given to them, or perhaps those mechanisms that you introduce are not very well suited for that very target group of people in your organization. So that's why in every security implementation, the first thing that you need to do is understand your target group. Okay, what information asset is they are actually directly uh, interact with, and then what type of security control is suitable for that type of group of people. So when you're designing this setup program, you actually identify, first of all, okay, you have this policy, you have this procedure. So does your people actually know, okay, how to actually implement those procedure in order to uphold the policy that you have in place? So if they don't understand how to actually do the procedures, then you can identify how to actually improve the procedures, or perhaps provide more guideline to help your target group in your organization. So awareness in a setup program is actually the very first step to ensure that your people know what to do, and they actually practice what you preach in the policy and what you want to implement through the procedures. So the awareness is only the first step, because awareness is your people know what to do, and then from the awareness you want to actually change their behavior for the better, in order to actually protect or help protect the information asset. So in every case, awareness is the very first step to ensure that your people understand what is actually a good security practice, why are they in place, and how to actually do good security behavior. So once you have proper awareness, it will followed by a very good or perhaps positive behavior. Alright, so before we continue, we take a 5-minute break. Okay, so from this point forward, you must understand first of all the very importance of the setup program, and then why setup program is important, and then how or why is it actually good to understand your target group in your organization before you actually implement any security control mechanism. If you understand this properly, then, okay, God willing, you can have a very good security control installed, and you can have a very good response from your target group. Okay, so we take a 5-minute break, and then we continue to the next section. So the first step when you are designing a setup program or an awareness program is to actually go down to the organization and identify the target group that you want to actually engage. Okay, so for example, in your organization, you can have the cleaner groups or the technical group, you can have the management group, you can have the clerical group, you can have the IT people, you can have the management people. So you can have many groups of people in your organization that actually deals with the information asset every day. Okay, so you need to actually have your own team, form your team, and you must perform this target group identification first. You want to engage your target group, and then first of all, you must perform the interview to understand their responsibility. Okay, do they actually know what is their responsibility in actually safeguarding the information asset? Or do they actually know what the information asset is actually there to protect to? Secondly, trust. How do they actually perceive the information security? Do they know actually what is safe security behavior? Do they know what they need to do or what they needn't do? What is safe? What is dangerous? So you must try to actually identify this target group, their strength, their weaknesses, their understanding. Thirdly, you must communicate. Try to be very direct and not using too many technical jargon in identifying their standing in the security behavior. Fourth, you must make them understand that security behavior is a cooperation and it is a team effort. So you cannot just have one group of people actually upholding the security behavior while another group is actually causing harm to the information asset that you want to protect. So here, again, identify how many group of people you have in your organization, understand what they are going through, understand their understanding, and you must ensure that they know that this security behavior is a team effort. So if you cannot have your people working together towards the common goal, then your SETA program might not be successful. Okay, so first of all, try to engage the target group. So once you identify who are you dealing with, okay, so you must ensure that each specific group that you identify need a very special way to be treated and to actually engage through your awareness program. So you must make this specific and unique group of individuals trust the information security as valuable and useful business requirement, even if they are just the cleaners or they're just the normal security guard or they're perhaps just contractors coming in and out of your organization. You must ensure that they understand the responsibility that comes in terms of protecting the information asset. Secondly, they must ensure that they trust the information security team. Of course, they themselves must know what they need to do, what they didn't do, but they must also recognize who will be responsible if certain incident happen. Thirdly, of course, you want them to behave responsibly with the information asset that you want to protect. Okay, so the key here is each specific and unique target group of people must be handled separately and differently, because you cannot actually treat management the same as you actually treating the cleaners, because their level of understanding might not be the same about what is safe and what is unsafe, and perhaps even between management and IT people, they have different understanding of what is safe or what is unsafe. So each specific group that you want to actually change the behavior through the awareness program must be properly identified, and the awareness program must be tailor-made to each specific group separately. Okay, that is a very key importance that you must remember when you are designing your own awareness and behavior changing program. So these are some of the guidelines to understanding the baseline behavior of what causes actually poor security behavior for certain group of people. So it can be perhaps sometimes just because of curiosity, they are curious what will happen if they did this, okay, or perhaps what will happen if they click this. Okay, usually you have a clickbait email that actually entice people to click on it, or perhaps they receive an email that actually state that they need to change the password. Okay, so although some people understand that it's very dangerous to actually click on any email that you receive without actually checking it first, but some people actually just trust whatever they receive in their email. So that is why you must understand this behavior and you must ask the right question to the target group. Do they understand what is safe and unsafe? And then secondly is of course for self-preservation. Sometimes the attacker might manipulate this factor in order to make sure that your people actually do certain action. If you don't do this, for example, your account might be lost, or perhaps you are actually spending money, but when in fact the money is still there, but you just receive a bogus email notification. Okay. Thirdly, because of carelessness, you accidentally leave your notebook for people to actually steal, or perhaps your phone that people can see what you are writing. Okay, and then of course the following is the poor infrastructure that you have within the organization. You don't have a very secure firewall, for example. You don't have a very secure wireless connection that people can actually use whenever they want, and perhaps perform a man-in-the-middle attack, for example. The following is of course lack of awareness. They don't know that certain behavior will actually cause certain vulnerability to be exposed. And then inconvenience. They find that whatever security measure that you have within the organization is very cumbersome to actually follow, and end up they are not actually using the security control. And of course, because obedience or fear, perhaps their very lives are in danger, or perhaps they need to actually be rewarded to by the attacker. For example, they say that if you do this, I will give certain amount of money, or if you didn't do this, okay, there will be certain danger to your family, for example. So these are some of the reasons for poor security behavior that can actually affect the people in your organization. Okay, so this can be used as a guideline when you perhaps are performing the interview to understand your target group. So you base your question based on this guideline to understand what your people are actually going through. So having said that, so these are a proper way to actually plan or design the security awareness and behavior management program based on this model. So there are 4 stages beginning from planning, strategizing, executing, and measure and adjust. In a nutshell, planning means that you actually try to design a proper awareness program that is tailor-made to a specific target group within your organization. Okay, so the first step is identify who or which target group you want to actually change the behavior or improve their behavior. So you must understand the base level of their awareness level, where are they actually currently, do they understand what they need to do, okay, what is their base knowledge when you actually want to improve, okay, or what is their weakness first of all. So this is why when you identifying this target group, perform the interview, identify their baseline, and try to improve the baseline to perhaps 20% to 40% improvement towards the first cycle of the awareness program. Okay, and during the planning stage also, you need to actually identify who will be in your team. Okay, who will be your technical people, who will be your management people, who will be your go-to person when you actually want to deliver your awareness program, and who will perform the interview and the analysis of the data during the planning stage. And then you need to strategize. Once you identify your target group, you have performed the interview. So the next logical step is of course to strategize. So you know these people, you know these are the baseline knowledge of these people, these are the baseline behavior, so you want to improve this behavior towards a very noticeable improvement. So you want to have a 10%, 20% improvement. So you develop strategies, you design those strategies. How to actually approach this group in order to perform or in order to improve their behavior. Perhaps there will be a reward, or perhaps there will be a disciplinary action in terms of certain things that they do or don't do with regard to protecting the information asset. Thirdly, to execute. Once you strategize, you execute, deliver the awareness plan and campaign. And then, fourth, of course, you measure and adjust the success of your awareness program and identify, okay, how much improvement does this program actually contribute in improving the behavior of your people. Okay, if there's a problem, or if perhaps there is a rejection from the target group, what is the problem? Is the awareness program too hard to follow, or perhaps isn't it effective? So you re-strategize and begin again on the next cycle. So this cycle is always repeating because awareness need to always be improved and be refreshed from time to time. At least, okay, usually the duration between awareness program is at least 90 days in between. Okay, 90 days means that about 3 months in between. So after 3 months, you remeasure again their baseline and you see whether they need to actually go through another awareness program. Okay, awareness program can be many approach. We will see on the next session later on. But the one that you need to remember is this 4 step: planning, strategizing, executing, and measuring and adjust your action. So I elaborate further for each of the steps. So first of all, in the planning stage, establish your team. Who will you have in order to perform this awareness program from the very planning and designing stage up until the measurement and actually remeasure and reevaluate stage. So you must have a proper team to actually do this thing from start to finish and perhaps do this process all over again. So you must build a business case, means that you must try to convince the management why is it important to have this awareness program. What will it cost if your people are not on board with this program? Okay, so you must establish a business case, make sure that you have a proper cost benefit analysis, and what will it benefit your organization in the long run if you can actually change the behavior of the target group. And of course, by having that, you try to obtain the management support. Because remember, the top-down approach is the most effective one. So if you don't have a management support, your awareness program might not be very successful. Okay, and after you identify the team, you need to measure the current level of security awareness and behavior of your target group. This is the first step. Also, the critical part of any awareness program is performing the target group analysis. So you need to determine first who is the target of the program during the planning stage. Because when you want to actually engage the people that you want to improve, which group of people do you want to actually improve first? Okay, because you cannot have an umbrella approach to an awareness program because each target group have specific needs. So there are actually unique awareness approach to each of these group, and because each group have unique behavior and they are not actually can be used to actually handle another target group. Perhaps they can be improved, but you cannot have a one size fits all approach in the awareness program. Okay, so the steps in the target group analysis is, first of all, identify the target group, of course. Secondly, understand their situation. What is their difficulty? What is their fear? How they can be actually manipulated in doing certain things, and what is actually troubling them in following certain procedures. Okay, the key here is to communicate, either to interview or perhaps doing analysis quizzes, for example. And then assess their level of awareness. Do perhaps quizzes, do interview. What will they do in this situation, for example? And then assess level of behavior to see which level of behavior can you actually improve through your awareness program. Second, of course, you strategize. You now have your team. You have performed the base analysis. You know what you are actually trying to improve. Now you see how will be the coverage of your awareness program. Okay, how many people can you reach? What will be the format that you can use for the awareness program? There are many types of format that you can use for an awareness program. Usually, the most straightforward one is using posters. You can also use verbal communication or from security talk. You can have a workshop. You can have perhaps email that you blast through every day, for example, to actually instill the safe and security behavior of the people. And then you need to identify the frequency of the use of those formats. How frequent must you blast the email? How frequent must you change the poster, for example? And then the quality of content. When you develop a content, you must ensure that, first of all, remember the key component is that you must make the message easy to understand, and the message must stick very easily. So this is why the first stage or the planning stage is very important. You want to see, okay, what is the core value of your people and how you actually try to use that core values to improve or perhaps use in your awareness program. And of course, you must have a proper communication and commitment plan to the people that you are targeting during the awareness program. So they must have perhaps a certain pact or promise or perhaps certain signature that they sign after every program to ensure that, okay, within this time limit, okay, I will promise that I will improve, for example, my security behavior. And of course, there must be some sort of motivational strategy, either by rewarding or perhaps through certain violation of rule. What will be the consequences? Okay, either enforcement or using reward as a method for motivation to ensure that there is a change of the behavior. So depending on the group of people, okay, perhaps rewarding is very good and perhaps enforcement is also very good. So you strategize during this stage. So once you properly identify the format and how to actually motivate people, how to actually select the correct content to actually use for the awareness program, now is actually the execution stage. So this is where you actually collect feedback from the awareness program. Let's say from the poster that you use, you see how does it actually change the behavior? Does it actually improve the understanding? Or perhaps by blasting email or perhaps through the security talk. Okay, how does it improve their awareness level and will it actually improve their behavior? So this is sometimes you perform the exit survey or perhaps you perform the survey based on the program output. So you see the effectiveness of your perhaps your speaker or your poster that you use, whether whatever that you are aiming from that poster is actually being recognized or improved in terms of behavior that you want to achieve. So this is where you collect the feedback based on the thing or the program that you actually perform. So the fourth one is of course based on the feedback and the evaluation that you receive. Now it's time to actually measure and adjust whatever you have actually performed, whatever result that you have seen, or whatever analysis that you have done. Now you see whether your program is actually successful or not. So use proper sample sizing. Okay, so how many percentage of people that you actually aim to actually improve? Perhaps from 100 people, you are aiming perhaps 60% of that people is actually improved in terms of security behavior. So you actually sometimes you can also perform tests, okay, written tests or perhaps behavior tests, or you see whether they are improving in certain aspect of the behavior. So you measure the execution, whether it's successful or not. Is poster effective or is the talk effective, for example? And then you must also have reasonable limitation for each of those approach. Because you cannot expect people see the poster immediately, they will change their behavior. Usually, posters is successful in the first perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. But after a while, if you use the same poster, that poster will just become one with the environment. People just didn't actually notice the poster anymore because it's part of the environment or the background now. So it's also important to change the poster frequently or to change the content of the email that you send, okay, frequently, to make sure that the information is always fresh and people actually take note of what message that you are trying to send. Okay, and then sometimes behavior may not always be visible, but you can see perhaps based on the security improvement that you have. Perhaps you don't have many malware incident after a while, okay, but you cannot see the behavior perhaps from people mentioning that I'm not clicking this and that anymore, but you can see in terms of security improvement, or perhaps you can see from way people are responding to certain security incident. They know where to actually report the problem, they know what to actually do, and they can actually identify certain things as a threat to your information asset. So this result can be invariable, okay, because each target group, sometimes the result is not always the same. So the most important thing is to keep the expectation very realistic, okay. Try to improve 10% to 20% perhaps in the very first cycle of the awareness program, and then try to improve gradually, okay, as you go further or as you actually make further amendment to the awareness program. So you modify and adjust and then relaunch the program again and see the result whether there is an improvement or not. The important thing is make sure your expectation is realistic. So in actually improving the behavior of the people through the awareness program, these are the critical success factors that you need to actually keep in check. First of all, of course, you need to have top management support, because usually people need to actually come to the awareness program if they are dictated to go to this program or to follow this program if they get an instruction from the top management, because usually people will not willingly or voluntarily go to this awareness program. So that's why it is important to have top management support apart from the support in terms of financial support. Secondly, of course, determine the baseline of your target group. Understand what is their current security behavior and how can you actually improve. Okay, and this you need to reach the target audience. Get to know your audience. What is their weakness? Okay, what is their like? How to communicate with them? What language do they like? What type of medium do they actually enjoy or actually consume day to day? If they constantly use WhatsApp, then perhaps your awareness message can be sent through WhatsApp. Or if they constantly use email, or perhaps they constantly use this certain area, then perhaps the poster are very suitable. And then get publicity. You must publicize the program. Make people join in the program and perhaps there are certain reward if they join the program. And of course, fifth is make it align with the organizational culture. Okay, you must make your awareness program actually expose them to certain ethical and perhaps moral value. And then lastly, okay, demonstrate how well security awareness efforts are working, perhaps by actually telling the target group, okay, this week we have 0 incident happening. Okay, so you reward this target group, for example. So you must always update the target group on their actual achievement in order to make them motivate to change their motivational or to change their security behavior for the better. So these are the critical success factor for any SETA program. So again, we'll take a 5-minute break before we continue to the next section. Now, in order to get the management support, of course, you must have a proper business case. So this is why when you're actually designing your program or want to actually engage your management, when you're actually identifying or assembling the team, you must have a proper people, perhaps from marketing and finance, and have them draft up the cost benefit analysis in terms of, let's say, certain incident happens because of negligence or accidental behavior from a certain target group in the organization. So what will incur the cost to the organization? Of course, the management will only look at the figures and what will cost them or what will they gain from a certain safe behavior that people will actually do. So you must analyze the stakeholder in terms of the client, okay, the business, the people that your organization are actually interact with, and how will it benefit if you have a safe behavior or if the awareness program is successful. Because why you must have a proper business case? Because first and foremost, you want to have their financial support, and usually this financial support comes in terms of the training budget. So you prepare the cost benefit analysis, what will be the cost, what will be the benefit, and usually the one that is actually doing this cost benefit is your financial people. So it's good to have one of the financial team or individual be in your team for the awareness program, and then produce the product charter to convince management and stakeholder to support your awareness program. Of course, apart from identifying the critical success factor, it is also good to identify what could cause problem to actually obtain a very successful awareness program. So the following are examples of some of the obstacles that you might face when you're actually performing the awareness program. Of course, first of all, people are so accustomed to doing certain things. So it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And of course, the attitude of the people that is involved. The security of information is not my problem, but it's a technical problem. This is usually the attitude of most people. And then implementation of new technology. You have this new software and hardware. Of course, people find it hard to actually use it, especially if they are not technical or tech savvy people. And then too much information or one size fits all approach to the awareness program. And then lack of organization in performing the awareness program. So you don't have proper planning in actually executing the awareness program. Next, you fail to follow up on the target group once you perform the awareness program. So after 3 months, you don't assess again whatever is the behavior of the group that you have performed earlier for the awareness program. So you don't reassess, you don't see whether in the long term, whatever behavior changes that you perhaps try to instill to the target group is still being applied or being practiced by them. And then of course, you try or fail to get the message where it counts because you don't identify the proper group for specific awareness program. And then of course, lack of management support because the management doesn't simply don't care because they don't believe that your program will be successful or beneficial. And of course, important too, if you don't have enough resources to perform the awareness program. This is usually true if you have a very small organization and you don't have the financial capacity to do it. And then, no explanation to why this security behavior is beneficial or is important. People will not find it motivational or perhaps motivate to actually do certain behavior because you are not explaining why this behavior is safe, this behavior is unsafe, or why how can they be manipulated by actually clicking on certain link. You don't actually show and explain what is the repercussion of certain action. And of course, lastly is you want to change the long established behavior within that target group within the organization. They are so accustomed to do things that way, and then without proper guidance, they find it hard to actually do things perhaps in a very safe behavior that perhaps doesn't cause threat to the information asset. So these are the challenges to make sure that or when you are actually trying to change people behavior through the awareness program. So understand them well and perhaps try to have a very strategized approach to overcome this problem to ensure that you have a very successful awareness program to change the behavior for the better. So to overcome those obstacles, of course, try to tailor-make your awareness program to actually answer this question by the target group. First of all, you try to make them understand how will the behavior enhancement or behavior improvement affect them. Will there be some reward that they can gain, or will perhaps they be penalized if they are not doing things correctly? And then why should they care? What's in it for me, for example? Why it is so complicated? So try to understand the motivation and also the problem of your target group. Okay, and try to actually relate whatever you try to explain with the mass media. What is happening in social media, for example, what is happening in the news. Okay, try to make people actually relate to what is happening and what you actually try to implement and improve through the awareness program. On the other hand, it's also good to try to get the support of chief level executive, usually the director, the bosses, in terms of getting the participation from the target group, okay, and get assistance from other departments, for example, the financial department, the marketing department, okay, the IT department, in actually finding the correct or proper manpower for your awareness program, okay, and try to actually involve the management because you want to actually give incentive to staff if they have a positive change of behavior from the program. And always listen to the feedback after a program has been performed or even during the introductory interview. What is their problem? What is their difficulties? And how can your awareness program improve them or help them in doing their job or protecting your asset? And have a very reachable deliverable. So, like I said earlier, target perhaps for 10% to 20% improvement in the first run, and then perhaps increasing those expectations gradually with every improvement of your program. So these are examples of the matrices that you can use when you are actually trying to measure the receive or perhaps the response from your target group. So for example, the metric here being used is you have a phishing awareness program. And then what is measured? You measure the number of people who fall victim to your simulated phishing attack, for example. So let's say you send a bogus phishing link and you see how many people actually click on that link after you perform a phishing awareness program. Okay, and perhaps those are not actual phishing link, just that when a user actually click it, for example, you just get the feedback how many people are actually clicking on that link. Or perhaps if you want to educate, once a person click, it will send to the page and stating or telling them, okay, you are actually clicking on a simulated phishing link. Should this be an actual incident, then you might fall victim to a phishing attack, for example. Okay, so how is it measured? Of course, using phishing assessment, and then how frequently. Perhaps you can do it monthly or perhaps bi-monthly. Okay, who measures it? Perhaps you can involve the security team, and the detail how to actually perform the attack, who will actually develop the attack, and who will actually have the analysis of the attack. So these are examples of the matrices and the deliverables that you can actually use to actually assess the success of your awareness program. Okay, so you can read through here examples later, and perhaps you can think of what can you use yourself when you develop your awareness and you try to see the success of your awareness program that you actually perform. Okay, so be creative, and perhaps you can think of something else, okay, that you can use as a measurement once you actually perform a awareness program. So what are the components or the approach that you can use for the security awareness campaign? So above here are some of the example of the components that you can use. So you can use videos, you can use talks, you can use trinkets or posters, and also you can perhaps have those awareness messages pasted in the coffee cup, mugs, or perhaps on t-shirts, or you can have monthly talk or annual talk, depends. The important thing is that when you actually try to use this component is to identify your target group, identify how it's best to approach them, and how can you actually keep track of the success of all these components, and how you can tailor-make this component to fit best towards your target group to achieve the behavior improvement that you want to actually get from your awareness program. So tips for a good awareness program. First of all, you need to remember every step of the way when developing an awareness program. First of all, always focus on the people, because you want to change the people's behavior. So try to understand the people that you are actually interacting with. Always communicate from the very beginning to the very end of the program, and also when you want to measure or perhaps re-evaluate and replan your awareness program. Okay, and then secondly, try to actually refrain from using too many technical terms. Okay, use a term that is easily identifiable and more understandable by your target group. Okay, and then try to use every available venue that you have in the organization or perhaps that is given to you. Sometimes you can do motivational camp, or sometimes you can just paste a poster perhaps on the toilet or at the entrance of your organization. So whenever you have a certain value that you can communicate your awareness messages, do so and identify those locations properly. Okay, and during every step of the way, even during planning and executing, always define learning objective. What do you aim to gain from this approach or this component? State them clearly, okay, and then mention it to the target group. What do you aim for them to actually gain from this awareness program? Okay, keep things light, okay, not too much information for every program that you have. Perhaps just a short talk during the morning, okay, or perhaps just a simple message on the message board is enough. Don't have so many components that you throw at your people that you hope that they can improve from those overload of information. Okay, so help user understand their role in actually protecting your information asset, because the key in the awareness program is to actually gradually change their behavior for the better. Okay, so you can do things slowly and surely, thus ensure that your people understand their role and they improve their behavior day by day gradually. Okay, so also important to make the awareness program according to the target group, meaning you tailor-make the program according to the specific needs of the target group, but at the same time, you need to formally record the result so that you can have proper analytics of the perhaps effectiveness of the approach that you use. And then of course, lastly, provide good information early. Always be clear of what you want, okay, instead of having the perfect information late. It means that you don't try to actually think about what you want to have at very one go. Whatever you want to deliver or whatever the message that you want to conjure to your people, make sure it is understandable, it's quick, it's reach your target audience quickly and easily being absorbed by your target group. That's why the key point here is to understand who the people that you want to actually improve and use that information to your advantage when selecting the best component to use in your awareness program, and use whatever available venue that you have to deliver your awareness content. So keep these tips of the awareness program perhaps for your future use later on when you actually be on the development team or the designing team for the awareness program later. Also, it's important for you to take note, in order to change behavior, humans usually have certain way to motivate them, either giving certain incentive or giving them certain disciplinary action because of the violation of behavior. So it depends, because it is up to you when you actually identify this group, which approach is actually best to feed or perhaps motivate this group of people. What are the consequences that you must or you want to offer to this group, either motivational or either disciplinary? Because humans, unlike computers, have feelings. So how can you actually use this factor of human to actually motivate them to be motivated to change, either through motivational approach or through disciplinary approach? So of course, in terms of motivational approach, you give incentive, you give gifts. Okay, so you must have a proper way to give this motivational inspiration to the people. Let's say if they report certain incident, okay, what will be the incentive of perhaps most incident reported by a department, or perhaps the less violation that's actually being done by a certain group of people. So the group that is actually perform better will get perhaps a hamper at the end of the month, for example, or get a bonus incentive by the organization. So it depends how do you want to reward it. Perhaps you can have a poster for employee of the month, for example. You see this type of motivational effort usually being used at organization. Okay, who performs well, it will be rewarded, and you can have this as a motivational tool to help people improve their behavior. And of course, in terms of disciplinary action, perhaps there are stages if certain violations are actually being done. So for example, this is just an example of what types of action that you can take. So for example, first violation, you have notification, okay, and they need to go on training. But perhaps after going on training, second violation is also being perform. So employee is notified, okay, and then you CC to the manager. Okay, if also that doesn't work, third violation, manager is required to have a meeting face to face with the employee and report result to the security, finding out the problem, what causes the problem to this specific employee to have a repeat offending violation that's constantly by this same employee. And then lastly, if the third action also doesn't help, perhaps the employee is reported to HR and perhaps he might be fired from his job because he is not competent to perform in actually protecting your valuable asset in the company. Because having him there after you actually constantly giving him chances after chances, perhaps will be jeopardizing to your organization in the long run. Okay, it's not just we have performed the very fight strike from the very beginning. You need to actually approach the problem and understanding your employee what his problem are from the very beginning, and if certain chances are not actually working, then you have to take the final step and actually firing the employee. Of course, lastly, how do you actually measure the success of your program? So you can measure the success of your program, first of all, when you have process improvement. You see that policy is in place, for example, is understandable, and perhaps people actually behave very well. Secondly, you have attack resistance in the organization. People can understand when an attack actually occurring and when a threat actually entering into the organization. They know what a threat looks like. They know what a weakness is actually there. Okay, they know who to report to. So this is where you have attack resistance. Okay, thirdly, you have efficiency and effectiveness as a result of your awareness program. So you see improvement in security incident response. Okay, so people actually report security incidents, or perhaps the incident is not actually happening frequently. And then the fourth one, you have internal protection, where you have proper protection against threats, where people can actually recognize the threat, they can know what to do in terms of incident happening, they know who to report to. So you have these four categories to measure the success of your awareness program. So you see the change of behavior between from perhaps low security behavior to a very enhanced behavior gradually from time to time as a result of your awareness program. So this is how you measure the success of your program. So of course, although you have successfully implemented or performed your awareness program, it's always good to always review and improve the program from time to time. So you revisit again the project objective, you take note of the achievement, take note of where needed improvement, okay, what are the shortcomings from the previous version of the program, and try to modify and improve, perhaps tailor-made whatever is successful for this target user and custom-made it to fit the other target users that you want to perform the next awareness program to. So this is how you always constantly improve your program of the awareness and changing the behavior for the better. Okay, so I think that's all that we have covered for this part of the chapter. So the thing that you need to remember in any awareness program, you need to remember the 4 steps in actually designing the SETA program. So the most important thing in any SETA program is you want to actually have a proper security behavior so that incident or accidental security incident will not actually happen. The focus here is you want to improve your human resources so that your human resource that you have actually help to protect your information asset. Okay, so by that, I hope you can use all the knowledge you have today, okay, and perhaps in the future you can design your own awareness program for the benefit of your organization. Okay, by that, I thank you for joining for today's session, okay, and all the best to you. Thank you very much.